Hello folks, and welcome to this latest webinar brought to you by The Manufacturer. You're watching me, Tom St. John, multimedia editor here at The Manufacturer, joined by Henry Anson, director, Joe Bush, our magazine editor, and Alex McCracken, marketing consultant and the author of our Momentum report. Now, we were going to bring you the research from our Momentum report. You can still download that and read that. That's still available to you. However, and we have agonised over this, we were at one point not going to run this because obviously the state of the global economy and the business world at the moment in the wake of Donald Trump's tariff announcements means that a lot of this research, these aren't the investment strategies of manufacturers at the moment. However, we do believe in our research, we do believe in our community, and we do still believe that a lot of what's in this report are still the underlying priorities of manufacturers, maybe just not at the moment, while things are, let's face it, gents, all a bit mad.
Tom, I absolutely agree, and I can't stress enough how much time we spent discussing whether to actually run this or not. We came to the conclusion overnight that we should go for it. Liberation Day is all about manufacturing. So global manufacturing has never been in the spotlight like it is right now. Donald Trump's tariffs are about where manufacturing goods are manufactured. So every single government in the world is now focused on their manufacturing sector, their supply chains, in a way they haven't been probably ever. So I think, as Tom has said, the findings in the report that the research report that Alex has found are still valid. But, they might just be a little bit sort of on hold for the time being. Who knows how the situation will pan out. Everyone's sort of reacting in a very knee-jerk fashion, and a lot of what we say today might prove to be wrong, but we're giving it our best shot here.
And try to put as positive spin on things as we can, while still recognising that, yes, this is a very tough time for the business world at the moment.
Yeah, again, totally agree. Just as an example, I'd never thought I'd ever say this anywhere or in a public place, but potentially Brexit's played a blinder here. We're going to be imposed with 10% sanctions and tariffs, whereas the rest of Europe's 20%. Does that create an opportunity for UK manufacturing?
Yeah, we do have some examples where actually some manufacturers are finding opportunities from it. Obviously, the recent news about Jaguar Land Rover that can only be negative, right? So there are some industries and companies that are being impacted massively by this. So we're going to talk a little bit about the positives, and we are going to answer some of your questions in relation to the Manufacturing Momentum report. It is obviously quite different, but we're going to do our best to bring you something and to bring you some sort of positive spin on the recent news.
I think that's the most important thing, isn't it? The Momentum report was originally written to show the community where the opportunities are in the manufacturing industry. Yeah. And whilst things are very different at the moment, there is still opportunity out there. And so this webinar can discuss the current opportunity, even though it might be temporary, because nobody knows what's going to happen next.
So just quickly before we hand over to Joe, every government in the entire planet is looking at their industrial strategy at the moment, and the UK government have promised us an industrial strategy to be launched in June. There's no way they can not do that now. So there are some positive spins here. I know we're sort of trying to glass half full type thing, but there are some positive spins here. Manufacturing is in the limelight at the moment. Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Just alluding to something that you said, we often talk about putting manufacturing more into the public eye. We talk about the sector being much maligned. It's not perhaps the focus of people coming into the sector in terms of career choice, but as you say, Liberation Day has put manufacturing front and centre of global news.
Much more so than the spring budget. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It didn't get much of a mention in Rachel Reeves' spring budget, but manufacturing, as you say, Liberation Day, that's what it was all about, is how stuff's made, where stuff's made. So, and the national media being what it is, it paints a very black and white picture. Either it's terrible or it's a good thing. Much like Brexit, whereas the reality is there's a much more of a grey area, right? It's going to mean different things to different businesses. We've spoken to manufacturers, we've spoken to associations across the sector. Automotive and steel are two obvious industries that are going to be impacted quite severely. But then on the other hand, we've spoken to other manufacturers who, an SME, for example, we've spoken to, who said, quote, it's happy days, because they've for years have been competing with imports from the Far East that are, undercutting them massively in terms of price, making it very difficult for them to compete on a global scale. Now all of a sudden they're on a level playing field with regards to price, but they're making a superior product. So they are, from their reading their response, they are quids in. Very similar chemical manufacturer said that again they've been competing for a long time against China and India. They've now got serious tariffs imposed upon them, so they see a massive opportunity. And also another thing that I think needs to be taken into account is how British manufactured goods are viewed across the world. They still carry a lot of kudos. I think we were discussing earlier the fact that luxury car brands, we've spoken about JLR, but luxury car brands are still going to be in high demand across the world. In response to the steel situation, speaking to somebody who said that places like Sheffield still carry a hell of a lot of reputation around the world for specialised, advanced manufactured steel products. So that the Union Jack mark still carries a lot of weight, and does stand UK manufacturers in good stead moving forward. So it's going to mean different things to different companies for sure.
One final point, Tom, before we hand over to Alex, if that's okay, is this very much feels like the week after Boris Johnson locked the country down in COVID. People don't quite understand what the implications are, but the new normal, and I didn't really like that phrase then, I don't like it now, settled in pretty damn quick. So this will even out at some point in the next month, 2 months or whatever, where there's a new reality. So manufacturers will continue to manufacture regardless of what is going on here. They will have to invest in order to survive and thrive. Yeah. So this feels like an incredibly uncertain time, and it is an incredibly uncertain time, but it will calm down over the next few weeks for sure.
Well, let's hand over to Alex now. This research obviously took a lot of time. And the massive caveat of it might not be entirely reflective of the current situation, but give us some tidbits.
Well, what we did in the report was we sort of went into detail about where the opportunities are and how solution providers can go and get those opportunities within manufacturing. Now, that has changed a bit. The depth of the detail has changed, but the fundamental drivers haven't. The things that are challenging manufacturers, where manufacturers see opportunity, that's still the same, but it's in a context of a topsy-turvy, upside-down environment. So the core principles that we found in the report still stand. They are just being operated in a crazy world at the moment. So the sort of headlines, if you like, of the 2025 Manufacturing Momentum Report were digital transformation has become the number one challenge. Last year it was people and skills. People and skills this year has gone to number 2, and digital transformation has overtaken it. And I'll go into a little bit more about that later. Also, there was a massive drive for growth. And it was so much so that we actually pulled it out as a category this year. Last year, we saw things like, we need to deploy AI, and we need to do it in order that we can grow, or we need to automate to grow. Now, this year, what we found is people are responding saying, we need to grow. Now we need to look at AI and automation. And so growth became a primary level driver just before Liberation Day. And one of the things that in the previous world that we had, if you can remember back to a month ago, with increasing national insurance costs coming in and all sorts of things. Now the drivers there were, one of the interesting things that we saw was that 68% of manufacturers were predicting growth. And if you are a manufacturer who has shareholders and you're on the stock market, if you predict growth, you have to deliver growth. Obviously, that changes now. Back then, you did. So 68% of manufacturers were growing, but only 7% of manufacturers were extending their headcount. So that growth was going to be generated by productivity gains. It could be generated by new markets and new products, but manufacturers generally aren't super fast at doing those sort of things. So it was going to be 68% of manufacturers were going to grow using productivity gains, not more staff, more lines, more factories, more output. Okay. So where do those productivity gains come from? That is what is inside the report. If you have a look in the report, you should by now have a copy emailed to you, I would hope. You're going to see it's in various different sections, and we go into each section in quite a lot of detail. What I'm going to do here is, because you've got it, you can read it, you don't need me to read it to you, I'm just going to give you the abridged headlines of each section.
I'm going to get you to hone in, first of all, on supply chains. Now, when you wrote this was 5th down the priority list. This obviously changes things a bit, doesn't it, in the context of tariffs and what's going on. So let's get.
Let me tell you about supply chains a month ago. So a month ago it was number 5 challenge. Reshoring was on the rise at a slow to medium pace. 26% of manufacturers were looking at reshoring, up from 9% the previous year. Scope 3 emissions were big. 19% of manufacturers cited Scope 3 emissions as a key supply chain challenge. And there was quite a lot of knowledge gap. Manufacturers were looking to learn more about how to optimize their supply chain and decrease risk and that sort of thing. So the big thing that we saw coming out of that was that manufacturers are looking for resilience, not innovation in supply chain. Interesting. And yes, the reshoring increase in appetite was a month ago the trends that we were noticing. Now it's a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what happens and how this all plays out, those days of extended global supply chains, which were already being threatened by macro geopolitical issues, is now severely questioned, obviously. And I think you're absolutely right, that reshoring, nearshoring is a trend that's going to continue. It's a matter of national security as much as anything. We have to be able to produce stuff in our own country.
Yeah, and all these sort of findings from the report are all about essentially manufacturers becoming, more resilient, more robust, more agile to changing circumstances. What we've heard over the last couple of weeks has been a catalyst to really put that under the spotlight. It's only going to accelerate the need for manufacturers to do that. And something like reshoring and nearshoring is, as you say, it's going to be. I don't think it'll be even a trend anymore. It will be a necessity probably for a lot of manufacturers.
I see opportunity there. Which
brings opportunity.
I don't understand quite where it is, and I can't define what that opportunity is. But there is definitely huge commercial opportunity in the reshoring of the supply chain for UK manufacturers, for the suppliers and the vendors in the community, I think. When you talk about national security, interestingly, cyber security. So last year, cyber security, we did a big thing last year about the fact that manufacturing was one of the prime targeted sectors for cyber attacks last year.
Was it like 1% of respondents were interested in it or something?
Yeah,
last year?
absolutely. The manufacturing industry didn't care.
Yeah.
It's like cybersecurity, that's someone else's problem. We don't care about that. Now, in 2025, it's exactly the same. They still don't. Nothing has changed, and our assumption has always been it's going to take one big failure for all manufacturers to jump on board and suddenly care about cybersecurity. I don't think it's one big failure anymore. I think where we are with America and China and IP, I think cybersecurity is going to become very important very soon, based on IP, not disaster.
Well, we're on the verge of or even if we are on the verge of it, we might be entering it. A global trade war between the US and China. Is that going to decrease the level of cyber attacks or cyber security within the global economy, or increase it? I think we all know the answer to that. So, the majority, or let's face it, the majority of cyber attacks do come from that part of the world. It's going to be an interesting landscape for manufacturers who at the moment are not prioritising cybersecurity. So,
if everything goes away and this all bubbles down back to nothing, manufacturers still won't care about cybersecurity until there's an issue. But if this continues as a continuing trade war, then I think cybersecurity will then take its own sort of increased level of awareness in manufacturing mind space.
Tell us what people were saying about AI a month ago. This is really exciting for a lot of people at the moment, not just in manufacturing, right? But AI is really taking the world by storm. In terms of usage within plants and what manufacturers are doing it at the moment, what are people up to?
It's getting better. So last year, everybody was dreaming. In fact, if you think about it, a month ago, AI was probably the most talked about thing in manufacturing. So in 2024, we saw people were looking for applications and they were dreaming about AI. They were saying things like, how can I AI my manufacturing space? Which doesn't actually make sense. This year, there's much more use of practical applications. People are looking for 75% of manufacturers are already in pilot phase. And 16% are reporting that AI is actively driving their business. This is a massive step up from last year. So AI is very, very important in manufacturing. Some manufacturers, some sectors are using it a lot more than others. Pharmaceutical, automotive, these guys are using AI more than your metals guys. But the trends that we're noticing are it's going beyond exploring into sort of practical possibilities. And manufacturers now want clear, proven development strategies. They don't want in the cloud stuff. They want case studies. They want to know how another manufacturer has used AI to increase productivity or to increase quality or reduce risk.
Sophistication of use, I think, use case we're seeing change as well. It's whereas perhaps last year it was being used in a sort of as a very basic tool, it's now progressed to real strategic decision making and problem solving. We're seeing generative AI move towards agentic AI. So it's a sector that has leapt forward compared to last year from what we're seeing from our research, I think.
What about automation, Alex? What are people saying around this topic, or what were they saying?
There's been an acceleration in adoption in the last 12 months. 55% of manufacturers are now focused on increasing automation adoption. It was only 29% last year.
That is good to hear, because we talk a lot, don't we, about how we're very much behind the rest of the world when it comes to this.
Well, if all these manufacturers are growing without increasing their headcount, and it is coming from productivity gains, surely automation is the linchpin.
Play a key role, yeah.
Any other things on automation? It's what manufacturers are requiring is, again, more case studies. They need to see, they don't need convincing why to automate, they need how. And the question they're asking is actually how fast. So for automation vendors out there who are looking to increase their opportunities in manufacturing, it's not about the wonders of automation, it's about the real delivery metrics, case studies. I'm going to say this quite a lot actually in this webinar. Case studies are the most important thing in manufacturing. If you have a case study, be it in automation, AI, supply chain, release it. If you don't have a case study, the one thing that you can do is write one. If you do have a case study, write another one. But if you don't have a case study in the manufacturing space, it's at least 20 to 30% harder for you to conduct commercial business, because manufacturers rely on each other. They are the number one beasts in peer-to-peer learning. They really are. They don't trust the internet, vendors, solution providers. They trust each other.
I think automation is a really interesting one, despite the fact that you said it was boring last year. But for me, I think it's a really interesting topic, because it is a strange one. The UK is still the only G7 country with a robotic deployment lower than the global average. So we're way behind the pace setters in the world when it comes to robotic deployment. And there's a numerous potential reasons for that. For sort of whether it's high volume, low value manufacturing, or that went to the Far East, which is easier to automate. There's definitely some reticence and skepticism that still relates to automation in the UK, which perhaps doesn't apply in other parts of the world. I mean, I remember someone telling me once, if you get shown around a factory in Germany the manager will beam with pride when he shows you the new machine in the corner. If you get shown around a factory in the UK, the manager will beam with pride when he shows you the machine that's been there since 1960 and still working. So yeah, there is a different take on it in the UK for sure. So it's a very interesting topic, automation.
So when you look at the biggest challenges within digital transformation, we can see, and it's in the report, that one of them is connecting legacy systems to sensors, to IIoT. There is a lot of aged technology in our factories.
Yeah, I mean, deployment of new technology is kind of a whole separate subject. It's not just introducing new technology, it's getting it to integrate with existing infrastructure, which, as you say, is often old. It's often siloed. It's particularly in larger organisations, so getting one area of the business to talk to another is often quite challenging. So the challenge of that integration with legacy infrastructure is a huge one within manufacturing. Yeah.
If I could step in here, Tom, manufacturing in this country particularly is deeply conservative with a small c. They take a long time to make decisions, but they do get there in the end, and the value of the deal is worth persevering with. So the deal value over a period of time is well worth sticking to, but they do take a long time and a lot of convincing. That's the nature of the beast.
Naturally risk averse.
Naturally risk averse,
which is
absolutely.
understandable.
Yeah.
You've only got to look at the current landscape to see that it probably benefits a business in the manufacturing space to be slightly, as you say, conservative with a small
and a lot of them are working on pretty small margins. So risk is something they take very seriously.
Something that's important for solution providers to understand about manufacturing, though, is should the situation that we're in now become recessive and we find that the flow of money around the world slows down or stops, manufacturers actually are quite cash rich. They don't require global funding in order to continue investing into technology.
It's that conservatism again. They sit on piles of cash. Yeah, I remember talking to the head of manufacturing at Lloyds Bank, and he said he finds it frustrating because they're not using that bank's facilities because they've got their own cash piles, but they're very reluctant to spend it unless there's a compelling case. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
And some of them are working on very long cycle times, right? Look at something like the aerospace sector. I think you did an article recently, Tom, about talking about how long a project might last in that sector. It's years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
13 years. I think it was.
I think it was about that. 13 years,
So they're
Yeah.
It's a long-term view. One of the other subjects that we covered in the report is sustainability and the move to net zero. And obviously that is still a big thing in whatever world we operate commercially. The planet still needs to survive. And net zero has taken the lead with 40% of manufacturers citing it as a challenge in 2025. That sustainability has moved again from awareness to action. There was a lot of people last year just asking for knowledge and how to do things, and now they actually want to deploy those strategies, and they are looking for help on that. Scope 3, as always, is a big issue. And beyond compliance, manufacturers they're shifting from seeing sustainability as a regulatory burden to a competitive advantage, again, a month ago. But that was very interesting to me. People were using net zero to commercially beat other people.
Yeah, it's about efficiency, isn't it? Fundamentally.
I think that, the phrase is, if your business isn't investing in sustainability, then you're not a sustainable business.
Yes.
So I spoke this week to the head of sustainability at Nestle, talking around what they're doing. When she joined or when she took on her role, she was a one-person team. Now they have sustainability professionals in every area of the business. And they impact every area of the business and right up to C-suite level as well. It's no longer just going around telling people to put stuff in the right bin, which is what I was told once from a sustainability manager. What their role encompassed when they first took it on. It's now strategic level decision making type roles and working much closer with the supply chain as well. You spoke about what did you speak about? No, you spoke about Scope 3. It's getting a handle on your emissions up and down the supply chain. So Nestle, I was speaking to this week, working a lot closer with producers, growers, farmers on regenerative agriculture and things like that to make sure that they are a sustainable business moving forward.
I mean, just to your point, despite the uncertainty we're living in right here and now, none of these issues are going away.
No.
They are.
No.
We talked about long term earlier. I mean, sustainability projects a lot of the time, it's about upfront cost for long term gain, isn't it? So, these projects will still continue to take place, and even when whatever happens in the next few months, sustainability is absolutely still going to be front of mind for all manufacturers. 100%.
I think all the core recommendations that we make in the report stand in any commercial environment. And if you read the report, as I hope you will, you're going to find that it says basically, if you want to be successful as a solution provider going into the manufacturing industry, what they need to see is authority first and sales later. Manufacturers want to work with experts, not vendors. So the solution provider community needs to be providing insights and frameworks and guidance, not pitches. We've spoken about case studies. Proof beats promise, always. They don't believe marketing hype. Manufacturers want to see other people doing it.
Can I step in here? So Joe passed me a press release from a very well-known global consultancy the other day, which was an exact example of how not to approach the sector. They were talking about the journey from Industry 4.5 to Industry 5.0. Now, manufacturers don't give a shit, I'm going to use that word, about these things. These are terms that are made up by the vendor community. It's that practical example that they're after. For Industry 4.5 to Industry 5, I mean, who's using that? They're not.
No one.
So don't use it yourselves. Now, it's possible that the people who author that report are listening to this webinar now, rip it up.
The other thing that vendors and solution providers really, really need to do with manufacturers, and this is unique to manufacturing, is you've got to be present. If you're not there where they are, you don't exist. Your presence digitally, it doesn't hold the weight that it does in finance and in legal and in retail. With manufacturers, they want to see you. They're a physical kind of group of people. They make things. Everything is real. Everything is quantifiable. It's touchable. And if they're going to choose a new supplier for anything, they're going to want to see them, meet them, see it, touch it. So you cannot rely on 100% digital in terms of marketing into manufacturers. That will not be successful. You have to be present, and present, it hasn't got to be a big thing, but you have to be part of the conversation, and be that at a round table, or be at an exhibition, or be at a summit, or you have to show your expertise in the context of the round where everybody else is a manufacturer, and you are committing your time and your expertise to that group of people. If you do that, manufacturers will just naturally be magnetized towards you.
You've got to give something to get something.
In marketing we call it the appropriate value exchange. You have to give somebody something of equal or better value in order for them to do it to you.
I don't think you can underestimate the requirement for understanding the needs of the business. When we speak to manufacturers about what they want from the vendor community, it is often about understand what my business needs and challenges are. Be an expert in what we need in the manufacturing space, understand the needs and requirements of our business.
So the other things that you'll find in the report, there's some voices of the community. We've got some industry leaders in there giving you their opinions. We also did some surprise live polling at Manufacturing Leaders Summit back at the end of November last year, just before Christmas, and that revealed some interesting stats, and there's a couple of pages on that in the report as well. But the report essentially is showing you where the commercial opportunities were, certainly a month ago. We believe that those commercial opportunities are, broadly speaking, still there. Yep. It's just that everybody is defocused onto other things at the moment. Now, if those other things go back to how things were, or proportionally towards how things were, everything in the report stands. In a world where we are in extended tariff war, The fundamentals of the report stand in terms of communicating with the industry, and you want to, because this is a cash-rich industry who still wants to grow. There's crazy stuff going on around them, but they've got the money and they've got the desire to expand.
I think we've been in crazy situations before, right? With supply chains, with COVID, with Brexit. They are a resilient community. They're problem solvers, manufacturers, right? So they're not just going to be sitting still. They're going to be finding ways around this. And like you say, they do have money to spend. So this research certainly can't be ignored. And as a vendor community, you certainly can't sit still, because you can be sure that your customers won't be.
Yeah, standing still for manufacturers at the moment is not an option.
Absolutely.
Whatever tack they're taking, whatever priorities there are within an individual business, maintaining the status quo is not an option.
Before we move on to some questions, and please do get those into the chat. We have some pre-submitted ones as well. But in 2 months' time, we will be gathering at Smart Manufacturing Week. I know quite a lot of you will be coming to that. If you're not, then why not? Basically, get signed up. But our Marketing to Manufacturers breakfast will be taking place, where we'll be continuing this conversation. And by that time, gents, we'll hopefully have a bit more of a clearer picture. Who knows? I mean, this is ever changing, but the conversation will absolutely continue during that week, won't it, Henry?
Certainly will. And as you said, there should be a new normal, whatever that normal is by then. So we should be able to provide a bit more context as to the timescales and the priorities at that point. Obviously, it's all very raw at the moment.
We'll also be a little bit nearer to Invest 2035, whatever that is, coming out.
Okay, let's get into some questions then. Thank you for submitting them, by the way. So we have this one here asking, what are manufacturers with large spaces doing to reduce Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions? Joe?
Yeah, thanks. Tough one. I think by now most manufacturers or most businesses will have some kind of strategy, some kind of handle on Scope 1 and 2 emissions. However, it's the Scope 3 is the tougher nut to crack, and ironically, it's where the vast majority of emissions within a manufacturer's supply chain is. I can't remember the exact figure, but I think it's between 80 and 90% of a business's emissions will be in Scope 3 emissions, and it's the dial is shifting with that as well. So the Science Based Target Initiative did previously allow businesses just to report on Scope 1 and 2 emissions. Now, if you want to be involved with that initiative, you have to have set targets around Scope 3 as well. So it's important for manufacturers to understand where their material costs are with regard to Scope 3 emissions. That will enable you to benchmark and actually take action. There's tools out there that will enable you to do that, but it's getting a handle on Scope 3 is the kind of the holy grail with regards to emissions, but it is a tough one. So, but understand where they are, and then from there you can benchmark. That would be
a couple of years ago, a manufacturer actually questioning whether Scope 3 and the emissions of their companies in the supply chain is actually their responsibility. But there's definitely a dial shift there, isn't there?
As I say, like if you want to be involved in the Science-Based Target Initiative, then yes, they are your responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah. A question here asking, we noticed that the adoption of digital transformation solutions in manufacturing companies is much slower than other sectors. What are the top 3 barriers to digital transformation for manufacturers? And I think, Hen, it comes back to your point earlier about manufacturers being conservative with a small c. And actually, even when they realise the benefits of certain solutions, they're still not always very quick to jump on the opportunity.
Yeah, that conservatism is inbuilt. You're absolutely right there. And Alex touched on earlier, it's the legacy systems issues as well. And then there's the pilot purgatory, which again, we talk about on a fairly frequent basis. But a lot of these initiatives get stuck in these pilot and then they don't get rolled out across the wider business. But going back to the report again, and it's still valid, digital transformation is their number one priority. They now realise it has to happen. There is no if, buts and maybes about this now. It's a journey and they're on it.
There's quite a few skills issues, I think, around digital transformation as well. There's the scalability thing. People are tired of pilot purgatory and they are struggling to roll out company-wide on technologies. And I think one of the primary struggles of that is skills. is digital competency within the manufacturing workforce.
I think that proof of concept around digital transformation is kind of what we're seeing anyway. It's kind of easy when you compare it to the pilot purgatory, that taking it from those proof of concept trials and scaling up across the wider business, particularly when you have those business silos that exist in so many manufacturing organisations. That's the real kicker.
Slightly controversially, Tom, if I may, I think the vendor community had been slightly guilty historically of offering to boil the ocean as well.
100%.
And these guys are sceptical, very sceptical. So again, it's taking a much more practical and outcome-based approach when you're talking to these manufacturers.
Case study.
And it can be a confusing landscape, right? Which again comes back to your point around skills. A lot of the manufacturers don't have that in-house experience and expertise around digital transformation, around AI, around data, that has the expertise and the knowledge to take the business forward. So they need clarity within the landscape, not to be put in a position where they can't see the wood for the trees.
Just in terms of clarity, then, what are our top 3 digital barriers to entry?
For me, it would be, I think, pilot purgatory, digital skills, and I think IT and OT convergence, bringing that connectivity piece together.
Can't argue with any of those.
That's exactly
There are lots, but that would be my top 3.
Yep. Very good. A question here asking, this is a data question, what are the biggest challenges manufacturers face when aggregating data from production assets?
Data's an interesting one in that in 2024, it was the number 3 challenge for manufacturers, and in 2025 it dropped to number 8. Now that was the response that we got from the research, but when we went to Leaders Summit, actually on the ground I didn't feel that was true at all. I don't think it has dropped to number 8, and I think there's a perception there. I think that in 2024 there was a lot of AI is the future, everything is AI, how do I AI my business? And the first response to that was, well, AI only works if your data's good. If you've got bad data, you're going to have bad AI.
Crap in, crap out.
Yeah. So everybody went, data. We've got to get our data sorted in order that we can benefit from the AI revolution. That's now sort of become less the case in AI, and with agentic AI, you can actually get AI to clean your data. But so I think that the drop from number 3 to number 8 is actually, it's just a sort of perception rather than a reality. 33% of manufacturers, as you'll see in the report, are saying that data is still a struggle and a top priority for them. One thing I do see from the solution provider community is solution providers who have data services and data products, they talk about dashboards all the time. Digital dashboards. You need a dashboard. Everybody wants a dashboard. Manufacturers do not want dashboards. They're not interested in dashboards. What manufacturers want is trustworthy, usable data that they can use to drive decisions. They don't just want to share data amongst each other that's meaningless. They want data for a purpose, not data for data's sake.
Again, I think it would for the trees scenario when it comes to data as well, right? Because manufacturers are capturing more data now than they ever have before, and the phrase, is that data is the new oil. Well, I heard a manufacturer a couple of years ago saying that's not actually the case, because data has no value if you just store it. Whereas oil does. You need to extract meaningful insights from it, and knowing how to do that is becoming trickier and harder to get your head around because there's just so much of it.
Yeah. Also, one of the challenges that's going to come, and we've referred to this earlier, is if manufacturers are, as they are, connecting as many machines as possible to IIoT so that they can get these dashboards that they don't want, the more you connect a machine to the internet, the more vulnerable it becomes to cyber attack. And everybody is connecting everything as fast as they can, and nobody seems to be protecting it. That's the sense I get.
And that comes back to the last question about IT and OT convergence being a barrier. You're all of a sudden you're connecting these things to the outside world that have never been connected to the outside world before, and so you're increasing your avenue of attack tenfold or 100-fold in some cases, probably.
Okay. Thank you, gents. I think we'll wrap it up there. We hope that you've enjoyed this. And like we said at the top, obviously this research isn't entirely reflective of the situation at the moment, but also, as we've mentioned, we do believe that there are some underlying points here that will be relevant tomorrow, in a few weeks, in 2 months' time when we come to speak at Smart Manufacturing Week. So just hold on to that and don't take your eye off the ball, because manufacturers are still trying to operate. They can't stand still, right? They can't afford to do that. Even in these testing circumstances, they've faced these sort of issues before COVID, geopolitical issues, Brexit, whatever. This is just another catalogue, something to add to the catalogue of issues that companies have been facing in recent years. So we hope you enjoyed it. We hope to see you at Smart Manufacturing Week. But until then, take care, gents. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.